Hello, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. If you're in the demand generation space, then it's very likely that you'll need to drive more calls. I mean, after all, calls are gold and generally convert so much better than web forms. The pay-per-call space continues to grow, so the volume's there. But is your volume for calls growing substantially? David Walsh is a president and co-founder of Visiqua, and he's a subject matter expert in performance marketing and in pay-per-call traffic. And on this episode, we'll discuss how to drive more pay-per-call traffic, how to drive better quality traffic with better intent, how voice assistant devices like Alexa and Home are emerging in the space, and how that reflects your brand's positioning and where the market's going. So let's tune in to a pay-per-call expert with a dialed-in shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. David, thank you so much for joining me today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, please tell us a little bit about your background and your career story thus far.
Sure, Kenneth. Thanks for having me on. Always appreciate the time to talk shop and talk about the industry. So my background is relatively confined to performance media. I have one of those typical startup stories where my very first job in the space about 18 years ago, 50 of us came in one day and they said, "Oh, by the way, the technology doesn't work like we thought it does. You're all fired."
Yeah.
Which was a bit of a rude awakening, but it put me in a really interesting position. At the time, I was living in LA, and a company, now Conversant, but back then ValueClick, was hiring. And I walked into ValueClick and had learned enough at my previous job to bullshit my way through the interview and actually get hired. Mm-hmm. And as we arrived there, ValueClick had acquired a company called ZMedia, one of the early small performance lead gen shops. And those guys were at the tail end of their earnout, and they walked out the door about 2 months after I showed up. So here I was early 15, 18 years ago, with a great opportunity, a ton of resources around me, and was able to cut my teeth learning from some good folks at ValueClick, and learning with a pretty solid safety net. So I spent about 3.5 years there until we acquired Web Clients, and I worked for Web Clients for about 6 months, and then struck out on my own. Went to join one of my other former ValueClick colleagues at a company called Dedicated Media, which at the time was really more of a CPM awareness type shop looking to expand into performance. So that was about 2007. Built a performance media practice for them, really focused around what you'll hear me call CPA, which is where, I think of that as like driving traffic to an advertiser's website for them to convert, and lead gen, forms, host and post, ping post tag, that kind of stuff. Did that for about 4 years, and then time was right for me to leave LA and started looking for some opportunities, and wound up relocating to Denver with a startup called Integrate. At the time was a lead marketplace and distribution technology, and helped build a performance media practice for those guys. And that's really the first time I touched pay-per-call was back then. So you're probably talking 2011, 2012. Had some guys who worked for us that could do it well, and I oversaw what they were doing, but wasn't really super involved. And we had built some technology over the top of Twilio at Integrate, and grew the business for a while. Integrate pivoted into more of a B2B demand gen proposition, and demand orchestration software proposition, which wasn't really my background. So 2015, I left, partnered with one of my clients, and started my current project, Visiqua. So we are... unsurprisingly, we're in lead gen.
Yeah.
We are in CPA.
Why Boulder, though? I mean, Denver and Colorado Springs have seen big jumps in tech and startups. Well, why Boulder? I mean, you're known for your teas more than your beers.
Yeah, yes. The Boulder was just sort of happenstance. My business partner had a large space up in Boulder that we could make use of.
Sure.
And so we sit within a incubator / investment vehicle that my business partner started. So we get office space out of it. We get connectivity. We get all the back office services. So, operationally, Boulder made a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I actually live in Denver, and the old Integrate offices were in Denver. So it's really a business operation choice to be up in Boulder. The great thing about Boulder is, you've got Techstars up there. You've got Foundry's had a wonderful run of investments. You've got a really strong entrepreneurial spirit in Boulder, and a spirit that likes to try new things and test and really fail quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good environment to find talent and to bring folks into your organization. And if you want to drive forward quickly, maybe not always correctly, but quickly, it's a good environment and a good place to be.
Yeah, let's get to the topic at hand, sort of talking about pay per call, but it's been the year of mobile in the advertising space. I know probably since Alexander Graham Bell was alive, but we've obviously seen an explosion over the last few years with mobile device usage. Pay per call seems to show no signs of slowing. Why do you think we're seeing that growth in calls, and especially when you generally see, for the most part, heads pointing down most of the time at their phones instead of holding them up to their ears? But why do you think we're seeing that growth in calls?
I think it's really a factor of the way that performance used to be. We drove so much into lead gen and into web experiences, and you had to mobile optimize everything, and everything had to work for a form base or some sort of website based experience, and we jammed a lot of customer experiences and customer journeys that really aren't great for filling out a form into that funnel, because that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, higher consideration purchases where you want to ask complex questions and not just read an FAQ sheet, we jammed those into form flows as well, or tried to turn them into a CRM campaign and send people drip emails and get them to convert. And those experiences and what the customer wanted really weren't well aligned. And so as pay-per-call comes online and becomes trackable, now we have a way that we can give the customer the experience they want. The customer can talk to a human. They can ask complex questions. I think about this myself. I was buying a new pair of skis, and I couldn't find out the difference in what a pair of bindings weighed. And there was nowhere for me to find it in spec sheets online.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked up the phone and I talked to somebody who was able to tell me the differences. So, and that resulted in me purchasing right then and there. I was able to get a black and white yes, no answer on what I wanted. Boom, done.
Sure.
You can't get that with the form. And so, as I said, I think we jammed a lot of people into that form direction that really should have been having a human interaction. And so once calls came online, obviously you immediately look and you're like, okay, all this stuff that we were doing really inefficiently, let's push it to the phone. Another great example, a client that we've worked with a bunch, T-Mobile. They know that if they can get a user to go into a store or a user on the phone, they have a 5 times higher chance of converting that user than if they try and convert them in a web flow. Mm-hmm. So another perfect example where they've actually gone and said, you know what, forget about e-commerce, push them to the phone, push them to the store. And so that's really driving a lot of growth in this space as we sort of unwind some bad decisions. And then it also opens up and has opened up new areas for performance marketers who are looking to grow to, as we have, expand into those spaces and say, okay, there are now verticals, there are now products, there are now purchases that can be successfully driven in a cost per call environment that were never open to us before because they just didn't work.
Sure. Any performance marketer knows that inbound calls generally convert extremely well, especially with those people expressing interest for most businesses, but they're also more expensive and harder to obtain generally. What are some of the metrics you've seen on conversion rates with those calls versus forms?
So it really varies by vertical,
sure.
But I'll circle back to the telecom example. Typically in a form environment, in telco, you're talking about a 1% to 2% conversion rate into a purchase. On the phone, you're talking about 10, 12, 14% conversion rate. So you can see how different they are mm-hmm. from those two environments.
So are the growth trends you're seeing more often with inbound calls or customer forms that the call center, for example, calls them instead, or is it inbound or outbound?
So I think we're in an interesting spot right now. I think inbound inbound has grown rapidly because that was easy. That was super digestible.
Right.
You've got high client intent, and you have connected home and voice-enabled devices like right on the horizon, but they're not driving a lot of volume right now. So I think near term, you're going to see an expansion in outbound. And we've seen some of our clients who previously were not interested in outbound come to us this year and say, look, if you can get us comfortable with your compliance regime, we'll do outbound. So I think, we've had some inbound, we're going to see some growth in outbound, and then it'll transition into growth in voice activated and voice connected devices in the home.
We'll dive a little bit further then into those those devices like the Echo and the Google Home. Where are those really starting to take a foothold? What are you starting to run into that you're starting to integrate with or plan for with those devices?
So it's with those devices right now, it's really simple, and customers think in terms of brand, right? They don't say,
Exactly.
order me a pizza. They say, call Papa John's. And so, if you're Papa John's, there's no reason to pay me as a marketer to drive you a call where they said, call Papa John's. So I think right now.
But it sure does show the power of brands, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, unbelievably, right? But, for us, as we look at that, we have to take it and say, okay, well, how's that going to evolve over time? And what areas do we think that we can begin to look at where a customer might not purchase just first trigger off brand? And I think you're going to start to see that with voice search and with customers becoming comfortable with asking their Google Home or their Alexa or their Echo, questions. What is the, who knows, what is to relate to local search? Like, what is the closest burger joint to my house? Okay, great. Then we can go in, would you like to call and make a reservation? And then we can think about driving foot traffic into retail. I think that'll be one of the first steps that we take in the home. And then, how we bridge that into comparison shopping and things like that, where we could potentially insert a performance-based ad. I'm not totally sure about yet, but I imagine it'll evolve in that direction eventually.
Sure. Where do you see it? I mean, do you see anything slowing pay-per-call down? I mean, you think especially about e-commerce and how that continues to shift in the market. But do you see anything slowing pay-per-call down, at least at this point?
Not right now. I think we're still in the process of unwinding some of those places where we forced what should be human interactions online. And I think we've still got a number of marketers who are coming to the space and saying, oh, you can drive people to call me and order something. I'll take that. We will definitely, we'll hit a wall at some point, just like we did with lead gen, where everybody's like, oh, I'll buy all these leads and it'll be great. And eventually you realize there's only so many good leads you can buy efficiently. Same story with traffic to your website. We'll eventually hit that with pay-per-call, but I think that we're a ways away from that right now. And with new sources of inventory potentially coming online with expansion in inbound and voice-connected home devices and things like that, I think it'll be quite a while.
So, why not just place these ads myself? Why not just jump on the Google machine and start setting these up? What's the point of working with a pay-per-call agency when I could do that myself?
I'm two minds of this, and I think a lot of people that I work with would probably cringe when I say eventually I think all the media should come in-house once you're big enough and you're savvy enough to understand how to place all the ads. Somebody like yourself probably could run a good portion of the ads yourself. Is that an efficient use of your time? I think that's a question you have to ask. But I also think about it in terms of like when you're coming to market, you can get to market so much faster, so much more efficiently, with such a broader base of knowledge by working with a third party. And, just looking at our own journey, right? We used Dialogue Tech, then we used Retriever, then we tried to build something on top of Twilio before we landed in Invoca and realized that, oh, this is the way we can go. Now, you as a novice could come to the space and make all those same mistakes yourself, or you could, you'd leverage a third party to get you to market quickly. And then eventually, as your program matures, I do believe you eventually hit a wall in performance where you can't buy enough, and it makes sense for you to continue your third party relationship and say, okay, I only really want these 100 calls from you because that's what's sufficient. And then the other stuff, I can't afford you guys to take a margin on or for me to pay a service fee on. So I need to bring that in house in order for it to be efficient, or I need to turn it off.
Yeah.
And I think that's the maturity of any performance media program. And so, the advantage is, third party, you get to market quickly, you get a lot of knowledge, you get the early efficient leads when you need them, you can test dynamically. You've got third-party tech you can lean on. So those are the reasons why I would say, especially as someone comes to market, it makes a lot of sense to tap the third-party resources.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And most people don't. I have run them in place to myself, both in-house and as part of an agency, and it's a lot quicker to do it through an agency. I mean, there's so many other internal hurdles that you can run into, finding the talent to do it, finding people that have gone through the experience of it, let alone have the time to go through the experience. I'd always advocate for an agency to do it, to turn it on more quickly and at least be able to really scale it up with that expertise is worth a lot. So, how has leveraging data helped you in the pay-per-call space? Talk, if you will, a little bit about the importance of data and how that's come into play in this space.
Yeah, I mean, I think data, just as we've seen the parallels in all the other performance marketing areas, you initially come to market with calls or leads or traffic, whatever it is, and you basically just got raw volume that you don't know a whole lot about. Maybe you don't know where it came from, maybe you did, but you don't know how it fits your buyer persona. You don't know how it aligns with, your core customer base, and you can really begin to leverage data early in the process to build a model of the type of person coming in from this media source looks like this, and they align nicely with our core customer who is, a head of household who makes $85K a year and has a dog. Mm-hmm. So, beginning to use data to model that early, that helps you scale, that helps you buy the right media without using a lot or without losing a lot of money in the process and learning the hard way. And then, specific to calls, there's some really interesting kind of other data that's out there, right, that you could get from a tool like Call DNA or like Signal AI, where you can get data about the different buying behaviors within the call. And then because you've turned it into actual data, you can now put it into a tool like Tableau and visualize 1,000 calls all at once and understand what's going on and make really smart, actionable decisions based off of that data that you can't really do by listening to individual calls or walking the call center floor. So, that's the other nice thing about leveraging data in this scenario is it's pretty agnostic to source. You can really look into and make smart decisions about your media.
So are all calls created equal? And obviously, the obvious answer is no. But many are for every other service. Many calls are for every other service a company has, like billing and customer service, scheduling, etc.
Yeah.
But what do you do to sort of validate the intent of the callers? What kind of advice do you give on how people can, validate the intent so that they can optimize the right kind of person in the market to buy a product or service? How do we sort of step up the sophistication, if you will?
Yeah, and I think, there's the obvious old school answer, right? You stick in an IVR and you say press 1, 2, 3, 17 for whatever department you want. And, that obviously helps scrub out individuals that are looking for customer service or have a billing dispute or something like that. But, where I think about it more is in types of media that you're buying and where those users might be in the conversion funnel. So if a user has hit a comparison shopping engine and they've found that you have the best deal on an iPhone 10 and they've picked up the phone to call you, that type of user is at a different point in the conversion funnel than a user who perhaps filled out a form online and said, yeah, I'm paying too much for my wireless service and I'd like a bid from Sprint or T-Mo or Verizon or whoever. And, thinking about that as well, outside of just the sort of traditional IVR, really does help you to craft the media and think about how you're going to interact with a customer. And so that's sort of how I think about it on two levels, right? The basic tech, and then the mindset of where the consumer is in the purchase journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, sort of switching subjects, personally, I've been a major fan of call intelligence softwares, like you mentioned earlier, the different brands for years. I've been a fan of them. The capabilities of applying those transcriptions with AI and natural language processing and then optimizing your ads is fantastic to me. I think congratulations, though, are in order as you were awarded the Strategic Call Partner of the Year by Invoca. So what did you do to sort of achieve that award, and what did that mean to you as a business?
Well, I think, to answer the second question first, it was really nice to be recognized by our partners at Invoca. We've spent a lot of time with their technology team. We've spent a lot of time understanding the typical use cases for Invoca, and then the type of use cases that a company like Visiqua has, where we're a little bit smaller than some of their enterprise customers. We're not the ones that are actually consuming all of the calls at the end, like a Liberty Mutual or T-Mobile is in Invoca. So we worked closely with them to understand where they wanted to go with their technology, came to them with a proposal for what we call a real-time router, which is similar to a ping tree, for those of you that are familiar with that in the lead gen space. What it does is we are able, as we ingest a lead and one of our partners generates an inbound call or a transfer around that lead, we can take some of the data, augment it, send it out to our number of buyers. So we do this pretty heavily in the insurance industry, and developed a piece of technology that can say, okay, yes, Liberty, this fits your buyer persona. Do you have an agent available? Are you likely to close it? Great, we can send it to you. You don't answer correctly to any of those. We can then look at 5 or 6 other pieces of partners with the technology. So, if you're deeply familiar with Invoca, they have the bundle technology. This is really like bundle 2.0.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't Invoca's Call Intelligence Summit one of the best branded MarTech conferences you can attend? I mean, who doesn't want to spend a week in Santa Barbara where the weather's perfect year round? And I've really enjoyed learning a lot about call intelligence from these guys. They've been a gold standard in this space.
Yeah, I said as I was headed home with Andrew and Jamie, that was one of the most productive, enjoyable, well thought out conferences that I had been to in a while. They spend a lot of time making sure you get access to the right people at Invoca, and that there are enjoyable events outside the conference. The pace of the conference is really good. It is. And the other thing too, and this goes outside of the conference, but the thing that we really enjoy about Invoca is because they're not also a media company, like a lot of people are in the space, they're non-competitive. So when we come to them and say, hey, we want to develop a piece of technology that's going to sit in front of Invoca and cause us and 5 other customers to use a lot more Invoca, they're all for it. And then they come back to us and say, okay, well, you brought us 5 customers. Have you thought about these 3 customers over here? Would you like an introduction? And that really permeates our experience with Invoca, and is one of the reasons we enjoy working with them so much.
So who are generally the types of companies reaching out to you the most? Is it agencies or brands or performance marketing agencies? Who are the ones that reach out to you the most that you're dealing with daily?
Well, I think I'll tie it back to the folks that have reached out to us directly from our involvement with Invoca and opportunity to speak at their conference and the award. And, that is a lot of insurance companies, both direct buyers, but also agencies that are looking to buy calls on behalf of their agencies. Some of them have been third-party out-of-house agencies. Some have been in-house agencies within larger companies. So, if you think about it, it's really folks that are looking to consume insurance calls right now. And that aligns a little, obviously, with the tech that we've developed to be able to route calls in that space. But those are the sorts of folks that are reaching out to us pretty consistently post the Invoca show. We've been working hard on marketing and trying to get our footprint out there so that more people do call us. Prior to that, and certainly as we were early in the cost per call space at Visiqua, there's a lot of outreach on our part, but focused in insurance, travel, and then home services is the other one. things like solar lead gen or windows, doors, you name it.
So where do you see the pay-per-call industry moving to, over the near term? What do you see as the future? What's the crystal ball say?
So I tie this back to what I talked about in Invoca, but I see a ton of parallels between where cost per call is evolving and how lead gen evolved 10, 15 years ago. And so that puts us right now, we're kind of in the second evolution of calls, right? Initially in both spaces, you had raw leads and raw calls. And then you had raw leads that you were trying to sell to a couple of buyers, or to raw calls that you're putting into a bundle to potentially just waterfall down and check off a few boxes. What I see now is really the evolution of more intelligent routing and more intelligent decisioning around how we're selling calls, how we augment calls, what data is provided around calls, and then just bridging some of the gaps, right? Things like voice to data in the lead gen when you can't get a hold of an agent. I think we're going to see some growth there as well near term. So those are the areas I think we'll see grow quickly. And then as that sort of evolution winds down, I think we'll be into the full-on connected home and voice activation side of it.
So, David, it is that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am always ready.
All right, here we go. Number 1, pay per call or cost per action?
Pay per call going forward.
All right. Broncos question for you. John Elway or Peyton Manning?
Joe Montana.
Wait, you were in L.A., not San Francisco.
I grew up as a kid in the Bay Area with those great 49ers.
Okay, there you go. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Another Rocky Mountain High, Colorado question, but on skiing. Aspen or Vail?
Aspen, less people.
There you go. And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Biscuits.
So, David, where can people search and find out more about you, follow your thought leadership, marketing advice, and more?
So, Visiqua website is a great place to go. We carry some of our thought leadership underneath the blog there. And we also have a newsletter that I'm happy for anybody to sign up to. And I promise we won't spam you more than twice a month.
All right. David, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective.
This was an absolute blast. Thanks for having me.
So there was my conversation with David Walsh, the president and co-founder of Visiqua, and he's a subject matter expert in performance marketing and pay-per-call traffic. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, over the years, we've pushed a lot of people down web form funnels when they didn't want to necessarily interact with a form. And a lot of that's because of how we mobilize and optimize the customer experience into those forms. As David explained, though, with higher consideration purchases, people still want to discuss what they want in a more complex way with someone and not via just a web form. So at least with a call, it's now the experience the customer wants. Make sure to give them that option. Second, pay-per-call has increased for a lot of companies because of some more effective marketing practices. And yes, they convert higher than a lot of e-commerce channels. But as you start planning for driving any additional call volume with home devices, especially like Amazon's Alexa and Google's Home, remember to consider that a lot of growth in traffic is also because marketers are now able to drive and track these calls more efficiently with new sources of inventory. These home devices will be responsible for a lot of that traffic, so make certain to position yourself as a brand leader. As he said, you don't often ask these devices for a pizza, for example. Instead, you most often ask for a specific brand leader. It's just another reminder of how important it is to position your brand more effectively when considering any call traffic. Third, not all calls are created equal, and as David said, you've got to look at intent. You can still get a lot of junk traffic from all kinds of sources or misdirected calls when they simply want to reach your customer service department or because they didn't listen to your IVR. So listen, if you will, to those calls, since it will really help you craft the media and show how you interact with the customer in order to help them through the purchase journey. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my privilege to spend this time with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. So in the immortal words of Rob Bass, I'm not internationally known, but I'm known to rock the microphone on this and every episode of A Shark's Perspective.